What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Wake and Jake College Football Show. We're getting to the end. We got Week 13 this weekend, and then it's on to rivalry weekend and conference championships. We are at the very end of the season, and again, like I said previous weeks, some people think that the best time of the year is bowl season, playoffs, all that stuff. I like the regular season. There's so much unknown, so much fun in the regular season. Obviously, a lot more games to be watched. So I'm sad to see it coming to an end. We are down to the final 2 weeks. Yes, Army-Navy game is going to be after conference championship games, but that is one game. Sorry, Army-Navy. I love the US of A. That game has ever done it for me. But typical show today, per usual. News and notes from the week. Previewing this weekend's games. We do have a Thursday night game this week, as well as a Friday night game, and then obviously Saturday's games. And then I will be giving out my 5 favorites. Positive attitude, winning mindset. We're turning this thing around week by week. But yeah, before we get into any of that, let's take a quick smoke break. And smoke break is brought to you by coffee, because what's a wake and bake without coffee? Alrighty, let's get into some news from the week. Not a lot in the news category, if I'm being quite honest. This is not really going to come as a shock. Now, the shocking part is it took this long to figure out, but Oregon has officially clinched a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Apparently, it takes until Tuesday to get that figured out. I don't know how we waited that long. Yeah, you know what? That's a rant for a different day. It shouldn't have taken till Tuesday to figure that out. There's a reason why it took till Tuesday. It's a rant for a different day, but ridiculous. Wisconsin, they have fired their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, after less than 2 seasons. Turns out the air raid is not going to work in Wisconsin, and that's why it's not really run in the Big Ten. It's just never seems to stick. Now, Nebraska's going to try some sort of version with it with Holgorsen. We'll see how that works for them. But yeah, Phil Longo out at Wisconsin. Not sure who's calling the plays yet. Fickle was asked about that, and he got a little snippy, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. But Wisconsin might be in trouble. And then we did, have the playoff rankings come out, and I do have a couple thoughts. Boise being the number 4 spot and getting a bye, I was not quite ready to put them there yet. Just because BYU lost a game does not mean we need to drop them out of that 4 spot there. Now, I'm willing to wait another week. I just didn't think we were quite ready to pull the trigger on Boise being the number 4 seed there. But whatever, it's fine. I was wanting to wait at least one more week before we talked about that, but they went for it. Notre Dame being as high as they are hurts me. I don't think they deserve to be in the offs, but again, I'm not the one making the decision. They have 1 loss, so I guess they have to be in the playoffs, but Notre Dame does not deserve to be in the offs, in my opinion. SMU being so far behind Miami is just somewhat bizarre to me because, and I'm fully buying in. I'm going to fully buy in. I'm buying in. There's a conspiracy theory out there that SMU is going to get jobbed from the ACC championship game, from the playoffs, because they get more money if they make the conference championship game, if they win the conference championship game, if they make the playoffs. And part of the stipulation for SMU joining the ACC is that they weren't going to get any of the TV money for the next, I don't remember how many years. I don't know if it was 1 year, 5 years, whatever it was. But if SMU keeps winning, you have to put them in, but the committee is just shafting them, and I am buying into that conspiracy that there's a vendetta against SMU, whether it's the ACC, NCAA, whoever it is, they have a vendetta against SMU. BYU, I don't think they should have been dropped as far as they were. They're still a 1-loss team. They have a win against SMU. It's not a fluke that BYU was undefeated. Did they have a close win here or there? Sure. Was their schedule as hard as a Big Ten team's necessarily? No, not at all. but they were still undefeated and they still only have one loss. I don't agree that they should have been dropped down as far. Now, that kind of goes back to my argument of I wasn't ready to put Boise at the 4 spot. I just wanted to wait another week. My biggest issue with the top 25, not even the playoffs, the top 25, Missouri. Missouri. How the fuck is Missouri still in the top 25? It blows my mind. They lose a game, and they may have even moved up a spot. That's absolutely a slap in the face. That's how you know this committee is an absolute joke. Missouri should not be ranked. Everybody knows it. Go on Twitter. The only people that are backing Missouri to be ranked and whatnot are Missouri fans and parents of the players. You know, it's not... Missouri does not deserve to be ranked. And then my last note is Tennessee. As much as I think they deserve to be in the playoffs right now, I get why they're not. Because you're really starting to split hairs when it comes to Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. You kind of have to put Georgia in because Georgia did beat Tennessee. Alabama did beat Georgia, but Tennessee beat Alabama. Ole Miss beat Georgia, so they all 4 should be in my opinion, and you're really splitting hairs. So kicking Tennessee out, you had to pick one of the 4. You did. You had to pick one of the 4 to kick out. You went with Tennessee. You know what? That's fine, because I think in the end, all will be made right. I think Tennessee will make the playoffs. It's okay that they got left out this week. This isn't the final playoff rankings. Who cares? We still have another 2 weeks of football to play. 3 weeks if you make the championship game. So relax. I think all will be made right. Tennessee will make the playoffs. Now, that being said, if they go and lose to UTEP or Vandy, then obviously they're not making the playoffs. This whole prediction scenario is if they finish the rest of the season undefeated. If they go 10-2, I think they make the playoffs. All right, let's get into the games this week. We are going to start with Thursday, obviously. We're going to go in chronological order. It would be stupid not to. NC State at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is an 8.5-point favorite at home. And, I mean, I've been very adamant. If you've listened to this at all, you know that Georgia Tech can beat anyone as long as Haynes King is the quarterback. It's just fact. Look it up. NC State, not a very good team, honestly. They do have 5 wins. They're a 5-5 team. But when we look at those wins, it's Western Carolina, Louisiana Tech. I guess Northern Illinois, that's a great win because they beat Notre Dame. And we saw how that went. And then they had Cal and Stanford. None of those are good wins. I mean, Cal would be their best win, I guess, if you had to pick one of those. Definitely. But Georgia Tech would be their best win by far if they pulled off this upset. Georgia Tech does have one of the best defenses in the ACC, and I guess nationally they're top third. You know, they're pretty good. And we've already seen NC State take on some good defenses, and it has not really gone well for them. They, if you kind of look back, they lost 51-10 to Tennessee, 59-35 to Clemson. Now 35 points. You could say, hey, that's a lot. Go back and look at that game. They scored like 21 in the fourth quarter after they were already down like 51-0 or 52-0. Not nothing, but you know what I mean. The game was over. It was garbage time. Clemson was no longer trying, and then they get scores. Lost 29-19 to Duke, and they did win one against a decent defense against Cal. Now 46th nationally, I guess, when it comes to yards per game and whatnot. I guess they barely count as a good defense, but, you know, there's one. I think this is going to be an ugly game for NC State, and I think Georgia Tech is going to roll to an easy victory. Georgia Tech's a good team, guys. All right, let's get into Friday night's games, or game. Purdue at Michigan State. Michigan State is a 13.5-point favorite at home. I mean, this is obviously, you know, everybody already knows this, but Purdue's season's over. It's been over. They're ready for the offseason at this point, let's just be honest. Over the last 4 games, they have combined for a total of 30 points. For For those who can't math, that is 7.5 points a game. That's barely more than a touchdown. Now, granted that some of those games have come against the likes of Oregon and Ohio State, Penn State, so it's hard to fault them for not scoring much. But yeah, they haven't gotten more than 10 points in a minute, and they've only done it twice against Power 4 opponents. More than 10 points twice against a Power 4 opponent. That's pretty bad. And yes, I'm going to count Oregon State as a Power 4 opponent. So I'm trying to do them a favor here. If you don't want to count Oregon State as a P4 opponent, then it's only been once. And that would have been Illinois. But Michigan State is currently on a 3-game losing streak. So if they're wanting to make a bowl game, they desperately need this game, which you don't need to be that desperate to win this one. Let's be honest. It's Purdue. They're dead. I fully expect Michigan State to win this one. I don't expect it to be much of a game. Aiden Childs, he had a rough start to the year. He's definitely gotten better as the year's gone on, which is a good sign for him. I expect this to be a game for him to really flourish and to kind of end the season with a bang. I know they still got one more game, but you know what I mean. Just kind of end on a high note. And if they can get to a bowl game, they do need this win. Saturday's games, I mean, the game that we have been waiting for. Indiana at Ohio State. Ohio State is a 13.5-point favorite. Okay, so this is going to be more of, I'm just going to say it flat out, Ohio State wins. I don't think Indiana wins. Ohio State is too talented. I think it's a 2-team race for the Big Ten championship game. It's always been Oregon. It's always been Ohio State. I don't think Indiana wins. They're a great story. They're going to finish the season 11-1. Ohio State wins. Now, that being said, this is going to be a rant for everybody who's been hating on Indiana. Indiana is undefeated. They are number 5 in the nation, and people are just losing their mind. SEC fans especially. Big Ten fans, not so much. SEC fans are losing their mind. I'm sorry, SEC, you guys are not necessarily the top dog anymore. It's just the way it is. Now, that being said, Indiana has had a very easy schedule. They have. We can't deny the fact that it's been pretty easy. But we're going to use Alabama, for example, or Georgia. Use any team. If you are handed an easy schedule, but you are a good team, what are you expected to do with an easy schedule? Run through it with no problem. And you know what Indiana did? They ran through their schedule with no problem. Don't give me this shit that, well, they barely beat Michigan and Michigan sucks. No, Michigan's got like 4 or 5 players on their team that could be going first round. So do not give me this. Michigan is not a good team, because sure, their record doesn't show it, and sure, they have had their struggles this year. But Michigan is not as easy of a beat as SEC mostly fans are making them out to be. I think Michigan could put up a good fight against a lot of SEC teams. Just saying. Indiana deserves all the love they're getting. They do not deserve any of this hate. Do not give me that strength of schedule bullshit. Look at Michigan. They, last year, won the national championship, but they kind of had an easy schedule to get there. Now, don't get me wrong. I know they had to win in the playoffs, and they had to beat Ohio State. Don't get me wrong. I know that. Everybody knows that. But they still had an easy schedule the whole season. Indiana's taken advantage of that. They were handed an easy schedule, and what did they do? They dominated. They didn't struggle week to week and barely get to this 10 wins where we're like looking back and we're like, oh, that was kind of lucky. No, they just straight up dominated the whole season. Indiana deserves all the love they're getting. SEC fans need to fuck off. Ohio State wins this game. Now, Ohio State, real quick, their future is looking a little less bright. I could have included this in the notes, but I obviously wanted to just do it for the preview. They just lost their center, Seth McLaughlin, for the year. He tore his Achilles in practice, and what a blow. Already lost your left tackle. You lose your center. Your offensive line is getting depleted. Your 2 best offensive linemen are now out for the year. Not great for your national title hopes. Now, I know Indiana fans saw that injury, and I know that they think their defensive line is just going to absolutely eat all day, and maybe they do. But I think Ohio State still wins, but the future's not great for them right now. Ole Miss at Florida. Florida is a 10.5-point dog at home. I mean, if Florida just beats Ole Miss, it will make this whole discussion of which 8-2 team, or I guess next week it'll be different, but which 8-2 team deserves to be in the playoff because, well, Ole Miss will have 3 losses, they'll be out. So that would make that whole argument so much easier if Florida could just do that, but I don't think that's going to happen. Going into the LSU game, we didn't know just how healthy Lagway was going to be, and so a lot of people didn't think he was even going to finish the game because, to beat LSU, you got to be mobile. Well, he didn't even have to be mobile. They didn't have to use his legs at all. He just had to sit in that pocket, maybe roll out a little bit here and there and throw the ball. They did not have to use his legs at all, which means, yes, he played a football game, and that's going to take its toll, but it's still an extra week to let that hamstring heal up. Now, do I think he's still going to be healthy enough for this game? Hard to say. Obviously, I'm not involved with the team at all. I have no inside knowledge. I just know that hamstrings can be a little tricky. And Ole Miss defensive line is a lot better than LSU's. And they are going to get after him, and he will need to use his legs in this one. I always obviously root for chaos because chaos is fun. So I hope Florida wins, but I really don't think that they do. I think Ole Miss defense is going to be too much for Lagway, and it's going to be a long day. They might be resorting to the third stringer at some point. We got SMU at Virginia. Virginia is a 9.5-point underdog at home. I said it already, the fix is in against SMU. I am convinced that some higher power is rooting against them, which makes me root for them harder. Their one loss this year was to a now one-loss BYU team. I don't think that's a bad loss at all. I think that's everything SMU needs. They should be ranked higher than they are. And ever since they made that full-time switch to Kevin Jennings, they have been playing great, and nobody can deny that. And I don't think Virginia is going to be a team to upset SMU. I think SMU gets to 10-1 going into the final week of the season. I don't know who they play, but I think they get to 11-1 this weekend. Ever since Virginia almost tricked me into giving them respect, I've lost even more respect for them. And for that, I am just going to root against them even harder. They are not good defensively, and offensively they're not much better. Anthony Calandria has not played good lately. Over his last 3 games, barely over 120 yards per game, 1 touchdown, 7 interceptions. As of right now, it sounds like he's going to be the starter this weekend. I know he was replaced this last weekend. But I would not be shocked if he gets pulled if they get off to a slow start. But I think SMU runs away with this one pretty easily. Illinois at Rutgers. Rutgers started as a 1.5-point favorite. Now that has swung to being a 1.5-point dog at home. They do have Kyle Monangai back, and they are on a current 2-game win streak. One of those coming against Minnesota. And Ethan Kaliakmanis has not played bad in his last 4 games. Let's just put it that way. Take away that second half against Minnesota, he's not played bad. Now, we have seen Ethan play twice against Illinois. Obviously defense coordinators had changed between those 2 games, but and one was also not a start. He came in for an injured Tanner Morgan. So stats, take them or leave them, but combined between those two, those 2 games, 13-28, 46% completions, 184 total yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Now, we've seen some, not all, but some quarterbacks really struggle with this Illinois defense, and we've seen Ethan Kaliakmanis struggle with them the last 2 years. I wouldn't be shocked if he struggles this week as well. I think it's going to be much the same. Maybe he gets off to a hot start like he did against Minnesota. Like we've also seen with Ethan Kaliakmanis, there's no way he keeps that up for a full game. I think if they can shut down Monangai, if Illinois can shut them down, because their run defense is all right, it's not great, but if they can shut down Monangai and force Ethan to throw the ball, that's going to play heavily into their favor, and I definitely lean Illinois in this one. A 1.5-point favorite Illinois is, so that's not much at all. But I do lean Illinois, and A little peek ahead, I might have them in my 5 faves. Iowa at Maryland. Maryland is a 6.5-point dog at home. Brendan Sullivan is out for the year, so Cade McNamara is the starter again, as I'm sure Iowa fans are so pumped about. Maryland they're a very dead team. They're on a 3-game losing streak, and it's not been pretty. None of the games have been really that close. And Billy Edwards, who has lit the world on fire let's be honest, he's very underrated when it comes to a quarterback in the Big Ten because he is thrown for a lot of yards. But he's not played well during this losing streak. And don't give me this, he threw for 335 last week and yada yada. It took him 55 attempts to get there. That's not great. And I don't expect him to turn things around this week against Iowa because I've said it before, just because this isn't the same Iowa defense we've seen in years past doesn't mean that they're not good. They're still a very good defense. Now, Maryland, the one way they do have a shot is they do have a very good run defense. Very good. Their pass defense is absolutely terrible. So if they let Cade McNamara beat them with his arm, they're screwed. But if they can limit Caleb Johnson and make McNamara beat them, they have a shot at the upset. Now, if all of a sudden McNamara just goes off and goes for like 25 for 30 for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, they're obviously screwed at that point. But if they can get a passing game going, they will win this game. If Maryland can somehow shut down Caleb Johnson, make them throw it though, they have a shot. They do. I do lean Iowa in this one, but there is a chance for Maryland. If you are a Maryland fan, there's hope in this game, not for the future. Minnesota Minute. Penn State at Minnesota. Minnesota is an 11.5-point underdog at home. And there's part of me that's, torn on this one where I can already see it. If Penn State loses this game, all these SEC fans who have been shitting on Penn State all year, saying how they're really not that good, all this stuff, yada yada, are going to look at that and be like, see, they lost to Minnesota. How can they be a good team? I already know it because these SEC fans don't know anything about the Big Ten. And they just think Minnesota, this team that I haven't heard about all year, can't be any good. And I just already know that that's what's going to be the narrative if Minnesota wins this game. So there is that slight, very slight part of me that doesn't want them to win just because of that. But I can't root against the Gophers. I want Minnesota to win this game so badly. Since 2019, and I'm not counting the COVID year, PJ Fleck and the Gophers are very good coming off a bye, and we already know PJ Fleck's bowl game record, so we've seen it. When PJ Fleck is given more than a week to prepare for an opponent, and first game of the season does not count. You have no tape on your opponent. You only have what you had last year. Not the same. But when given more than a week to prepare for an opponent, PJ always has his guys ready. And I think Minnesota is going to have a flawless game plan that they execute perfectly and they win this game. It's obviously unrealistic, but he does always have his guys ready. Now, I do think that this Penn State is better than the 2019 Penn State team that came to Minnesota. So that does make me a little nervous because you could argue that Minnesota's not better than that team. I don't know. I think Brosmer's a better quarterback. Maybe the receivers are not as good this year. Who knows? The key to this game for Minnesota is the line of scrimmage, offensively especially. I think the defense is going to be fine. They're going to make enough stops. Penn State is going to score. It's going to happen. We just got to get past that. But the offensive line needs to play their best game. If Minnesota's offensive line does not, if they look anything like we saw at Rutgers, where Minnesota had 35 total rushing yards, 4 sacks allowed, 8 tackles for loss allowed, and who knows how many pressures. If you do that sort of performance again, this game is over. Minnesota stands no chance. The defense will eventually give up late in the fourth, and Penn State blows Minnesota out. The offensive line is the key to winning this game. It really is. Like I said, I think the defense will be good enough. They're going to make enough stops. It's going to be up to the offense to get it done, and I fully expect Rosemer to do it. I fully expect Darius Taylor to do it. I fully expect Elijah Spencer and Daniel Jackson to do it. But I don't have faith in that offensive line. I do. I've seen them do it, but that Rutgers game has just left such a bad taste in my mouth. It does make me nervous for this game. So the key to this game, Minnesota's offensive line. BYU at Arizona State. I mean, Arizona State. Can we finally give them some love? It was like the second or third game of the season, and I was finally introduced to Kenny Dillingham. Yes, it is his second season. No, I could not have picked him out of a two-person lineup with me being the other person. Knew nothing about the guy just because Arizona State was so off the radar. And then I saw an interview with him, and if you don't like Kenny Dillingham, then fuck you. How can you not root for that guy? He has turned me into an Arizona State fan this year, easily. And they do not get talked about at all, because this is a team who, when Kenny Dillingham took over, it was a disaster. Herm Edwards had left just an absolute disaster behind. So many sanctions and problems and loss of scholarships and this and that and yada yada. Took over a disaster of a program and turned it around in 1 year. He is in his second season and they are flourishing. He he didn't even expect them to be this good this year, and they are not getting talked about enough. If they win this game, they are basically a shoo-in for the Big 12 championship game because they have Arizona next week. And do I think Arizona is going to beat Arizona State? Not a chance. Now, Arizona State is only a 3.5-point favorite in this game, which basically means that Vegas has this as a toss-up, basically. Now, every game is important. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. College football, every game is important. But this one is just a little more important for both teams, because if BYU loses this game, they no longer control their own destiny, and you can basically kiss their playoff hopes goodbye. And if Arizona State loses this game, they're definitely not making the playoffs, and they more than likely will not have a shot at the Big 12 championship game. Right now, they are third in the Big 12. I think it's BYU, Colorado, then them, and then Iowa State behind them. So if they win out, they're in, and there's a good chance they make the playoffs. If they lose this game, it's over. These teams are pretty evenly matched, I would say. They're different styles of a team, but just very similar. BYU does have the edge defensively, but offensively, I do give the edge to Arizona State, just because everybody talks about the rush attack, and as they should. Cam Scadaboo has been amazing, and they run it a lot. But nobody talks about the passing game. Quietly, Sam Leavitt has been great this year. Maybe not early, but as we've seen with some young quarterbacks this year, he has progressively gotten better as the season has gone on. Over his last 3 games, 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's just been very efficient with the ball, precise, just not turning the ball over. It's been great, and nobody's talking about it. They have a very balanced offense. Last week, we saw Cam Scadaboo do nothing. He got 73 yards on like 20 carries or something like that. That's terrible. He had a terrible game. He couldn't get anything going. But Sam Leavitt threw for like, I don't remember what it was, 200, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, just 60, 70% completion, just killing it. And I think Arizona State wins this game. Now, obviously, they're not underdogs, so it wouldn't necessarily be an upset, but I got my money on Arizona State. Colorado at Kansas. Kansas is a 2.5-point dog at home. I mean, can they do it 3 weeks in a row? Because if they could, that'd be fantastic. Just knocking off every top team. They already beat Iowa State. They already beat BYU. Why not beat Colorado? And could they do it? Definitely. There's no reason that they can't. But it's kind of hard to do that 3 weeks in a row, so we'll see. Now, offensively for Kansas, they do love to run the ball. That is definitely, they're a run-first team, and they are very good at it. Now, Colorado does have the 7th best run defense in the Big 12, so they're nothing special, so they're not that great. Now, Kansas has played 4 of the teams in front of Colorado who do have better run defenses, and Arizona State was the only one to keep them under 200 combined total yards. They still rushed for 151 yards and 4.5 yards per carry. It's hard to stop this running attack. Now, part of that is because Jalen Daniels, he is a very mobile quarterback, so that does open up the passing game as well. But when he starts to roll out and breaks off on a run, it's hard to contain him. And I've already mentioned it. We've already seen how the first 5 games of the season, Jalen Daniels never broke 200 yards passing, and now he's done that for the last 5 games, and how he has just been a different quarterback this second half of the season. They could pull off the upset. Defensively is where I, have my worries, because Colorado has a great offense. We all know that. But Kansas defensively they're all right. They got 2 good cornerbacks, so maybe they can slow it down a little bit. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I think Colorado's going to be able to score quite a few points. So if Kansas can keep up with them, they have a shot to pull off this upset. But if they get that run game shut down and they make Kansas one-dimensional, I don't like Kansas' chances. Wisconsin at Nebraska. Nebraska is a 2.5-point favorite at home. Wisconsin is spiraling. They are 5-5 on a 3-game losing streak. They just fired their offensive coordinator, and they have not scored more than 2 touchdowns in their last 3 games. 13, 10, 13. Pitiful. And Braden Locke, terrible. He has been absolutely terrible over this last 3 games. And Tawi Walker hasn't really done anything special either. It's just been a disaster for this Wisconsin offense. The defense has been good. Props to them. You almost beat Oregon because of your defense. But the offense has just been such a disaster. Now, Nebraska, on the other hand, has not necessarily fared much better. They are also 5-5, and they're on a 4-game losing streak. And they also recently, they didn't fire their offensive coordinator, but they demoted him and hired a different offensive coordinator. Dylan Raiola has been banged up, and he has not played well over their last 5 games, I guess you could probably say. The rush attack, mediocre at best. Both teams, it's just been ugly offensively, especially. They both desperately need this win too if they're going to make a bowl game, because Nebraska's last game is at Iowa, which is not an easy win, and Wisconsin's last game is against Minnesota, which is also not an easy win. So if either team wants to make a bowl game, they need this win. Now, we know who's calling the plays for Nebraska. It's the great Dana Holgorsen, but we have no idea who's calling Wisconsin's plays, or at least at the time of this recording, no idea. Like I said, they're spiraling right now. So it's not good over in Madison right now. Now, Nebraska, I personally at least, feel like they're in a better place than Wisconsin. I think bringing Dana Holgorsen in was a decent move. I think Matt Rule is a good coach. I'm not saying Fickle is not. I just think Nebraska is in a better spot currently. I think the loser of this game obviously is going to miss out on a bowl game, because I don't think either one wins their final game of the season. I am definitely going to lean Nebraska on this one. Pitt at Louisville. Louisville is a 7.5-point favorite at home. Pitt has completely collapsed. Started 7-0 and then has now lost 3 straight. SMU, Virginia, Clemson. SMU and Clemson, good defenses. So, I guess I get it. Maybe. Virginia is the outlier, though. How do you lose to Virginia? Now, over this 3-game losing streak, Pitt's offense has struggled. They started the season so explosive and just have kind of pittered out. Eli Holstein has also not been great, which has led to this offense struggling. Now, he's been kind of in and out with injuries. He didn't even play last game, but when he has played during this last 3-4 games, he's not been great. Now, defensively for Pitt, great run defense, top 15 in the country. Pass defense, on the other hand, atrocious, 112th in yards allowed. And unfortunately for them, Louisville has a top 15 passing attack in the country. They're very good at slinging that ball around, and Pitt has proven that they cannot stop anybody from throwing on them. If Pitt can bring back some of that firepower on offense we've seen at times this year, and they can keep Louisville out of their backfield, this game could be close. I think Pitt loses their fourth straight. All right, let's get into the evening games. Honestly, I don't love the evening slate this week. I don't think it's that great. We got Army at Notre Dame. I mean, maybe that does it for you. Notre Dame continues their very easy schedule. They're 14.5-point favorites. I think technically they're the home team, but I don't think they're playing at Notre Dame. I think they're playing at Yankee Stadium. I would love nothing more than for Army to upset Notre Dame for many reasons. One, because I root for chaos. Two, because I don't want to see Notre Dame in the playoffs. They're just going to get beat. And three, I don't think they deserve to be in the playoffs. I know they only have one loss, so you have to put them in, but look at their schedule. I know Army is undefeated and they've played a very easy schedule, but Notre Dame's schedule has been just as easy, you could argue. I know that's a lie. Don't come at me. I know it's been harder than Army's, but it's been pretty easy. And they lost to Northern Illinois. I just cannot get that out of my head. They lost to Northern Illinois. Now, like I said, I know Army's schedule is obviously easier. Their best one is probably ECU, which is the only team they've played that currently has a winning record. So don't come at me. I know Notre Dame's schedule has been harder than Army's. I'm not an idiot. But their schedule has been so easy, and they still have a loss. And it's not even to a team that they should have lost to. You'd think you look at their schedule preseason, and you're like, oh, they have one loss at this point in the season. Who did they lose to? You'd think probably Texas A&M or maybe Louisville. Northern Illinois. I just can't get that out of my head. Now, I can't in good faith put my money, my vibes, anything behind the upset or the spread. As much as I hate to say this, I think Notre Dame wins this game. Now, it is a service academy that they are playing, so the under is very much alive. So if you are going to put any sort of money on this game, I mean, that's probably where I would go with it. That's just me. I'm also, winning attitude, winning mindset, positive attitude, turning this thing around. But maybe don't take advice on this game because I'm not touching it with my money. But Notre Dame wins. Alabama at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a 13.5-point underdog at home. I don't expect this to be much of a game, honestly. I hope it's loud and raucous. I would like it to be. It would be sad if it wasn't. It also would be very funny if Oklahoma won this game. They're still a very good defense, so I mean they may give Alabama trouble early, make it a game. I would love it if they made it a game. But we've already kind of seen what happens when Oklahoma does face a top offense in the SEC. And sure, they've done a good job of keeping those teams under their averages, whether it's points, yards, both of those, whatever. They still just can't do enough offensively to make it a game. And I feel like it's going to be exactly the same this time around. Unless they garbage time, they might be able to put up some points. I don't know. They've already faced 5 of the top 6 defenses in the SEC, and they have struggled to get any sort of offensive consistency against any of them. I think maybe it's close early, maybe, but Alabama's going to run away with this one. Texas A&M at Auburn. Auburn is a 2.5-point underdog at home. So far this season, Texas A&M has avoided playing all but one of the top 6 defenses in the SEC. And yes, I say top 6. Why not say top 5? Because top 6 is still really good in the nation. They're still top 40 if they're 6th in the SEC. The only one that they've faced is South Carolina. Another thing they've avoided is playing, just dominant defenses overall, too, when you look at their non-conference schedule, except Notre Dame. And when you look at the correlation between that game against South Carolina and that game against Notre Dame, the one thing that they have in common is they lost. Both of Texas A&M's losses have come against really good defenses. And all of their wins have come against teams that don't really have great defenses. I I mean, if that's not a trend, I don't know what is. Auburn has a pretty good defense. They are now Texas A&M's strength, by the way, on offense, running the ball. Auburn, top 15 team at stopping the run. They are 19th in points allowed and 13th in yards allowed. I think Texas A&M's going to struggle moving the ball in this one. Call me crazy, but we've seen it already in 2 other games against good defenses, and Auburn has a decent defense. I think the one bonus that A&M does have is they have a mobile quarterback, which, like most teams do, Auburn has struggled a little bit. Not like LSU has, but they've struggled a little bit with a mobile quarterback, but no more than your average team does. Now, if we look at Auburn's other side of the ball, though, offensively, not great. It's been very inconsistent all year, especially at quarterback. I guess Peyton Thorne has started to play a little better over the last handful of games, I guess. That's not me saying he's playing outstanding or great. He's playing, I guess, better than he was. He's not turning the ball over as much, basically, is what I'm getting at. A&M's pass defense, not great. Run defense, average, I guess. I don't think Texas A&M's defense is... They're still a good defense. They're not a great defense, which means Auburn has a real shot at pulling off the upset this weekend. And again, I root for chaos, so I really hope Auburn does win. They've been so inconsistent offensively. I cannot confidently say that they will win, but they do have a shot in this one. Iowa State at Utah. Now, Utah is a 7.5-point underdog at home, but it is Utah at night. And for years, we've been saying it, Utah is a difficult place to play at night. And I think even though they may not have the record this year, I still think it's going to be a difficult place to play. These are 2 of the best defenses in the Big 12 going at it right now. The only difference is Iowa State does have one of the best offenses in the Big 12, whereas Utah does not. They have one of just the worst offenses in the country. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. They are this year's Iowa. Just a waste of a defense when you have a terrible offense. Iowa State has really struggled in 3 of their last 4 games. And when they do struggle in a game or lose, it's usually against a team with a really good offense. It's obviously not going to be the case this week, which means I think Iowa State does pull off the win. And I do think, this will probably be similar to pretty much every other Utah game. It'll be close early because of that defense, but the offense is going to do so little. This is exactly what we saw against Colorado, by the way. The offense can just do so little that the defense can only do so much, and then they kind of just start to give up, and the other team just starts to pull away. And that's pretty much what I expect this weekend. It might be close early, might be close at half, maybe even in the third quarter. Eventually the defense gives up, Iowa pulls away. Iowa State, sorry. Vandy at LSU. LSU is a 7.5-point favorite at home. Now, obviously Vandy's been America's team this year. Diego Pavia, how can you not root for them? They've always been the laughingstock of the SEC, so for them to be having, a 6-win season is great for them, and you can't help but root for them. And I would love for them to at least get to 7 wins. And I don't know what would be funnier, if they beat LSU or if they beat Tennessee next week, because both fan bases would have a meltdown. I think it would be funnier if LSU lost, just because it is this weekend, and I think it'd be more than just the fan base melting down. I also think Brian Kelly would melt down, because fans are already upset with Brian Kelly, and Brian Kelly is already upset with his players. Seems to be every week. If they lose to Vandy, heads are going to explode, and I am all here for it. Ready for that. It's going to be great. We've already seen Vandy take Mizzou and Texas down to the wire, and we saw them upset Bama. And if you listen to the show, you know the game plan to beat Vandy is you have to do at least 2 of these 3 things, if not all 3. You have to be successful on stopping them on third downs. You have to keep the time of possession battle even or win that, and you can't lose the turnover battle. If you do all 3 of those, you'll win. If you do 2 of the 3, you might still win, but it'll be close. But if you lose all 3, then you will not win against Vandy. Now, LSU also likes to hold on to the ball and control time of possession. So this will be a very interesting game because both teams just want to hang on to that ball. Now, defensively, both teams are bottom teams at stopping teams on third down. So this might be a very low scoring game. Because I'm having a hard time backing Vandy for the upset. I really am, because it is LSU at night. It's going to be loud. It's going to be raucous. It's going to be hard to play. But I am looking at the under in this one, just because you have two teams who like to control the time of possession, can go on long drives, are good at converting on third downs against defenses who are bad at stopping teams on third down. It is the recipe for not a lot of possessions, low scoring game. Again, I'm hesitant to pick Vandy for the upset. I think it would be fantastic. It would be funny. It would be good for them. I'm just having a hard time backing it. And last game of the evening, USC at UCLA. UCLA is a 4.5-point underdog at home. Throw out the records for this one. Both teams, it's a rivalry game. You can't look at the records in this one. Both teams desperately need this win if they're going to make a bowl game. UCLA needs to win out. USC just needs one win in their last 2, and their next game's against Notre Dame. Not easy. So this is the one they most desperately need as well. Now, each team's first season in the Big Ten has gone significantly different. UCLA started out terrible, 1-5, and I considered them one of the worst teams in the country. And, hindsight 2020, you look back and you realize they actually played a very tough schedule. LSU, Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, and Minnesota, and no bye week in between there. That's a brutal schedule. You're facing Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State. Those are 3 of the top 5 teams in the country. LSU, who still a top 25 team, and Minnesota, who is one of the better teams in the Big Ten. That's a tough stretch. Since then, they are 3-1, and Ethan Garbers has been playing amazing the last 4 games. 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and just to show you how good that is, he's got 14 total touchdowns this year, so that's 10 of those 14 have come in just the last 4 games, and I think he's got 11 interceptions, so only 2 of his 11 have come in the last 4 games, which means 9 of those 11 came in the first, 5 games or whatever. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. 6 games, still brutal. Now, USC, on the other hand, started 3-1, and people were thinking, oh, here comes USC. They're just going to waltz through the Big Ten, and since then they've gone 2-4. Now, they've lost a lot of close games, just games that they should have won, held a lead in the second half or even the fourth quarter, and just could not close it out. USC decided to switch up their quarterback before their last game against Nebraska. They benched Miller Moss, and Jaden Mayava is now the starter. I'm not an expert, and I'm not involved with the team. I don't see or hear anything behind closed doors. I know nothing. But I thought and still think that making the switch to Mayava is a huge mistake. I don't think Moss was the issue with that offense. Now, Mayava did not play bad in his first start, so I'll give him that. They did get a win, and he did not play bad. So I guess you can't really say it was a bad decision, but it was one game, and like I said, I don't think Moss was the issue with that offense. Now, there are 2 glaring issues with this UCLA team: their pass defense and their ability to run the ball. They are 101st in pass yards allowed and 129th in total rushing yards. Florida State, Kent State, Middle Tennessee, and Colorado are worse. Florida State, Kent State, and Middle Tennessee, terrible teams, are combined 4-20-something. Kent State has no wins. Florida State has 1. Middle Tennessee has 3. Terrible teams. Colorado's the one outlier there. They just straight up refuse to run the ball. I kind of believe that Deion's just trying to get Shedeur bump up his numbers and get him drafted and show off his arm. So that's the teams that UCLA is ahead of when it comes to rushing yards. Not great. So their lack of rushing attack and does kind of make me nervous, but their inability to defend the pass makes me even more nervous because what does Lincoln Riley like to do? Throw the ball. I want to say UCLA wins this one. I want to lean UCLA in this one just because of how they've played over the last 4 games, 5 games, whatever. So I'm going to lean this game just based on the progression we've seen from that team versus USC. That passing defense does worry me. All right, let's get into my 5 faves. But before we do that, let's take a quick smoke break. All right, time for my 5 faves. I got Illinois minus 1.5 at minus 104. I think Illinois wins this one relatively easily. If you want to do Illinois money line at minus 111, you can do that too. I almost had that make the cut. It is one of my honorable mentions. I don't blame you there. Tennessee minus 41.5 at minus 115. We've already seen what Tennessee has done to teams that are way, way beneath them. Chattanooga, NC State, Kent State. They blow them out. That defense dominates and that offense hums. Tennessee wins this one in blowout fashion. I think UTEP's over-under team total is 6.5, and I think the under is juiced. It's going to be gross. Minnesota team total over 16.5 at minus 122. I mean, there is no way that Minnesota doesn't score at least 20 points in this game. Arizona State minus 3.5 at plus 100. I already said this offense is not getting the love that they should because Sam Leavitt has been playing great. I think BYU, their magic is starting to flutter. Arizona State is at home. I think that crowd is going to be electric, and Arizona State wins this one quite convincingly. Vanderbilt and LSU under 53.5 at minus 110. You got 2 teams who just love to hold on to the ball. We've seen Vanderbilt games. They're low scoring. They make it ugly. They drag you down into the mud and they beat you. Not saying they're going to win this game. I just think that there could be not a lot of possessions, not a lot of scores. Honorable mentions, I already mentioned Illinois money line. I got Tennessee team total over 47.5 at minus 130. I got Minnesota plus 11.5 at minus 108. And Duke money line at plus 128. Duke money line, I didn't want to do that one. The reason it didn't make the Fave Fives is because I've got Duke in the Power 4 money line parlay. Ole Miss, Ohio State, Iowa State, Duke plus 364. Positive attitude, winning mindset. We're turning this thing around. Thank you all for joining me. Not maybe the greatest slate. I guess I've been saying that for a few weeks now, but nonetheless, I'm still excited because I love college football, and I am sad to see it come to an end. But we've also got rivalry week next weekend, so there's some things to look forward to. I'll talk to you guys on Monday to recap the weekend.